All right, good evening and welcome back. Welcome back to JPC Spiritual Talk. It's Jared Campbell. So this evening, we're going to cover some important international news that has expired from the 19th through today. So we're going to talk about hot zones, U.S. Embassy drone attack, which took place on July 19th, Israel's Yemen strike, and NATO's take on Ukraine's wartime strategy. Before we get into these updates that I've taken time to research, we'll start out in a quick prayer asking our Lord, the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. And I'm going to ask Christ, my God, without you, I can do nothing. Please help me with this task I'm about to complete. Keep me truthful, keep me honest, keep me objective to the facts, to the sources. Keep me always the apple dry. And thank you for everything you've done in my life and all of our lives. Great is truly your faithfulness. We pray all this in your holy name, in the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, now and forever, the sages. Amen. Beautiful. The Lord is our shepherd. All right, so let's jump into this. So we're going to start out by talking about Israel first, okay? So we're going to talk about one killed in a drone attack near the U.S. Embassy office in Tel Aviv. So a drone attack near the U.S. Embassy branch office in Tel Aviv resulted in one fatality. This was July 19th. Okay. So it resulted in one fatality and 10 injuries on Friday. Yemen's Houthi rebels claimed the responsibility for the attack, describing it as a significant military operation using a new drone. So listen attentively, using a new drone capable of evading interception. This is huge. The incident has heightened alert levels in Tel Aviv, with increased air patrols by the Israeli Defense Forces, IDF. An investigation into how the drone breach defenses is underway. So key points. So the incident details. A drone attack occurred near the U.S. Embassy branch office in Tel Aviv on July 19th, killing one person and injuring 10. The city was put on high alert and residents were to follow emergency instructions. The IDF also confirmed the blast resulted from a drone, increasing air patrols to protect Israeli airspace. Responsibility and claims. Yemen's Houthi rebels claim what the responsibility for the attack. They sure did. The Houthi spokesperson stated the attack was in response to Israeli actions in Gaza and would continue until the aggression and siege on Gaza are lifted. So pay attention to the terms aggression, right? Used both for Russia and it's also used for Israel. It's very interesting. So let's listen to how they use their words. Casualties and damage. The deceased was a 50-year-old man who suffered severe shrapnel injuries. Several others were wounded and taken to nearby hospitals. Eyewitnesses and evidence. Eyewitnesses reported a loud, whirling sound, right? Noise before the explosion. Photos and videos online show drone fragments and damage at the scene. The context. The attack seems part of an ongoing hostilities following a surprise attack by Hamas on Israel on October 7th, and subsequent Israeli offenses in Gaza. The conflict has resulted in a significant casualties on both sides, with over 38,000 Palestinians and 1,400 Israelis reported dead. All right. The conclusion. So the drone attack near the U.S. Embassy branch office in Tel Aviv, claimed by Yemen's Houthi rebels, has intensified the already tense security situation in the region. The incident underscores the broader context. So it underscores the broader context of escalating violence between Israel and militant groups, with significant civilian casualties and the potential for further regional conflict. I believe so. So we're going to get the screen shared over. Right? We're going to take a look at some videos, right, for what we were just talking about. So bear with me. All right. So if you're questioning why RT News is up on the screen, well, RT News has provided videos. That's why they're on the screen. So they're one of the few sources that provided some videos. So here are some of the videos of what we were just talking about, right? With one killed in that drone attack near the U.S. Embassy office in Tel Aviv.
חבר'ה, נפל כטב"ם בתל אביב, בשחוב שלום עליכם, מתחת לבית שלי, פיצץ לי את כל החלונות בבית, החלונות באוטו, פינו את כל האנשים מהבתים. חבר'ה, נפל כטב"ם בתל אביב, בשחוב שלום עליכם, מתחת לבית שלי, פיצץ לי את כל החלונות בבית, החלונות באוטו, פינו את כל האנשים מהבתים. זה כטב"ם. לא, מצאו את הכנף שלו.
מה זה לא לעבור? גבר, תגידו מה קורה. בוא'נה, אני גר פה בשכונה, מה?
זה כטב"ם.
מה זה עזה?
אחורה, חבר'ה. אין לנו סטטל. אחורה, אחורה.
All right. Some other videos. We're not going to watch all those. All right. So parts of the drone that was found near the strike, pictures of that right there. All right. So we're going to move on with some other news. So from the EU, right? So in other news, in other international news from the EU, Fyodor Lukyanov. Trump's return would be the EU's worst nightmare. The old world is extremely vulnerable to an American leader who could. So he went on to say, the old world is extremely vulnerable to an American leader who could depart from the liberal Atlantic consensus. This guy was interesting. So Fyodor Lukyanov discussed the potential implications of Donald Trump's return to the U.S. presidency for the European Union, the EU. He argues that Trump's leadership, which diverges from the liberal Atlantic consensus, could pose significant challenges for the EU, especially given its current geopolitical and economic dependencies on the United States. So here are some key points, right, when I was looking into this. So shocking concern in the EU. The EU is unsettled by the recent events in the U.S., including an attempted assassination of Trump and President Biden's recent gaffes. Trump's potential return to power is highly destabilizing for the EU. Trump's previous presidency, despite Trump's controversial style, his previous term did not damage transatlantic relations. Biden has also adopted many of Trump's policies, such as demand for increased military spending and economic rebalancing. 3. European dependence on the U.S. In 2022, the EU aligned closely with the U.S. on Ukraine conflict, preceding an independent stance. This alignment has led to dependency on U.S. leadership, particularly in NATO. Fears of strategic autonomy. There are concerns that Trump might deprioritize Europe, forcing the EU to address its strategic autonomy. The EU must prepare for a scenario where it must handle its geopolitical challenges without U.S. support. Interesting, huh? Economic and geopolitical challenges. The EU faces pressure from the U.S. to engage in economic confrontations with China, which may intensify under Trump. Interesting. Historically, Europe has managed to pursue its economic interests even during the Cold War, but now more constrained. So I'm staying objective to these sources, right? Their words, not mine. So shift in U.S. focus. Since Bill Clinton, some of the sources I had looked into, they mentioned that since Bill Clinton's presidency, the U.S. has been reorienting its priorities away from Europe. The EU has yet to adapt to this shift. It remains vulnerable to changes in the U.S. foreign policy. My conclusion is that Lukyanov concludes that the EU needs to prepare for a potential second term of Donald Trump. Interesting, whose policies could significantly alter the established liberal Atlantic consensus. Very interesting. This could compel the EU to confront its own strategic and economic challenges independently, a scenario from which it currently needs to be prepared. Interesting. All right, so we're moving on. So we're going to talk about Donbass, right? This was on July 20th. So Donbass pushed logistic strikes and heavy wing bombs the week in Russia-Ukraine conflict. There are videos too. So Moscow, right? So Moscow has made new gains in Donbass while continuing its campaign against Ukraine's military rear. Over the past week, the Russia-Ukraine conflict has seen intensified hostilities with significant developments, including Russian advances in Donbass, continued strikes on Ukrainian logistics, and the deployment of new heavy bombs. Russian forces have captured vital locations and targeted high-value Ukrainian military assets, as well as infrastructure. Interesting. So as I continue reading, I want you to focus on the map and the places you see on this map, okay? So the Russian advances in Donbass, right? You see the places there. Russian forces has announced the liberation of these areas and the Donetsk People's Republic, DPR. Additional advances were also reported, signaling a westward push and increased control over strategic areas. Even the village of Progress, part of the heavily fortified area, saw significant combat. Strikes on Ukrainian logistics. Train station attack. Russian forces used Iskander missiles to strike a train station in the Kharkiv region, destroying military hardware and causing casualties among Ukrainian soldiers. Training ground attacks. Another Iskander missile targeted Ukrainian training grounds, resulting in significant Ukrainian troop casualties. So some of these areas you will see is what it's talking about, right? So development of heavy wing bombs. So FAB 3000 bombs. Russia has officially acknowledged them using the FAB 3000 high explosive bombs with guidance kits. Interesting. Enhancing their reach and accuracy. Operational use. These bombs were destroyed. I say again, these bombs were deployed from the Su-34 aircraft, demonstrating their capability to strike from high altitudes. Interesting. Lancet kamikaze drone strikes targets. The Russian Lancet drone has been used effectively against Ukrainian artillery and anti-aircraft systems, electronic warfare stations. Notable strikes. Recent strikes included the destruction of a U.S.-made M109 howitzer and a Soviet-era 2 K-22, and also an anti-aircraft vehicle. The past week in Russia-Ukraine conflict has been marked by significant Russian military gains and aggressive strikes targeting Ukrainian logistics and military bases. These developments highlight the escalating intensity of the conflict and the continued strategic maneuvering by the Russian forces to consolidate control and also disrupt Ukrainian defense capabilities. Beautiful. So here is a video of them raising the Russian flag. And it's in Urivika, I think is what it's called. So a lot of these videos from the Russians, I will mute right away, just in case there's music in them, right? If you're asking why RT News is up, once again, they have maps and they have videos, so that's why. I read a lot of different sources. A lot of the sources I read don't always have maps, they don't always have videos, so that's the reason why I like to put up the sources that do. Some more maps. Here's a video, right? Just hitting. I think that was the train they were talking about. Let's take a look. They're using that Iskander missile. So we're talking about. That was a part of my write-up, my report. All right, so this strike was conducted with a unit exited the buses, with up to 160 servicemen reported killed or injured. All right, enough of that. We've seen enough, so let's move on, right? All right, so we're going to talk about Israel's long arm will reach enemies anywhere, according to Netanyahu. So here we go. So Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has praised the Israeli Defense Forces (IDF) for large-scale air raids on Yemen's port city and Hodeidah or Hodeidah, which resulted in significant damages and casualties. The attack was a response to a drone strike by Houthi rebels that killed one Israeli and injured others in Tel Aviv, the one we had just talked about. So Netanyahu improvised that this operation serves as a warning to Israel's enemies that the country will respond to threats no matter how far they originate. So some of my key points, right, when digging in and reading this. So Israeli air raid on Yemen, location and impact. The IDF concluded a large-scale air raid on Hodeidah or Hodeidah, Yemen, causing a significant fire at the port's oil terminal and injuring at least 80 people. Netanyahu's statement claimed the port was used for military purposes by the Houthis, who received weapons from Iran. Purpose of the attack. The raid was a response to the Houthis' drone attack in Tel Aviv that killed one person and injured several others. It was 10 near the U.S. consulate. Drone attack in Tel Aviv. A Houthi drone attack in Tel Aviv resulted in one death and multiple injuries. The IDF cited a human error for the failure to intercept the drone, but they used a special drone, right? That research. Response, justification. Netanyahu and Defense Minister Yoav Gallant improvised that the air raid on Yemen was to demonstrate Israel's capability to retaliate against threats from any location. The warnings to enemies. Deterrent message. Netanyahu declared that Israel's long arm can reach its enemies anywhere, reinforcing the country's resolve to defend itself. I think we've seen him do that a lot. Upcoming speech. Netanyahu is scheduled to address the U.S. Congress, likely to further highlight Israel's stance on national security and threats. Houthi reaction and threats. Promise of retaliation. The Houthis vowed to avenge the Israeli air raid with more impactful strikes, criticizing the attack as an attempt to pressure Yemen to stop supporting Gaza. Ongoing conflict in context. Houthi actions. The Houthis have targeted Israeli-linked merchant vessels since October in support of Palestinians in Gaza. International involvement. The U.S. and UK-led coalition have been striking Houthi positions, claiming the group acts as a proxy for Iran. Interesting. I conclude, right? So I conclude the recent Israeli air raid on Yemen's port city of Hodeidah, following a deadly Houthi drone attack in Tel Aviv, underscores Israel's readiness to respond to distant threats decisively. Prime Minister Netanyahu's statement reflects a strategic message to Israel's adversaries about the country's far-reaching military capabilities. I say so. The ongoing conflict involves multiple regional and international actors, complicating the dynamics and potential for further escalation. I say so. We're going to listen to Bibi for a second. Here we go.
From the beginning of the war, I made it clear that Israel will act against all those who attack us. This is why earlier today, I asked the Israeli cabinet to back my decision to strike against the Houthi targets in Yemen. The port that was targeted is not an innocent port. It's used as the entry point for weapons that are supplied by Iran to its Houthi terrorist proxies. The Houthis have used those weapons to attack Israel, to attack Arab states in the region, to attack many others. This strike comes in direct response to the killer drone attack yesterday that killed one person and injured several others 100 yards from the U.S. consulate in Tel Aviv. But the aggression of the Houthis goes well beyond that single attack. Because for the past 8 months, the Houthis have launched hundreds of ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and drones against Israel. The only reason those attacks have not caused a greater loss of life has been the defensive measures taken by Israel and its allies, which together have intercepted hundreds of projectiles. I would like to thank the United States, Britain, France, and other members of the International Maritime Coalition that was formed to repel Houthi attacks. But the drone attack that struck Israel in the early morning hours yesterday shows that more than defensive action is needed to curtail the Houthis. Offensive action is also needed. It's needed to ensure that Iran's terror proxies pay a price for their brazen aggression. For over half a year, the Houthis have not only attacked Israel, they've also targeted the ships of dozens of countries traversing the Bab el-Mandeb Straits. This is a maritime corridor through which some 30% of the world's maritime commerce flows. The international community must redouble its efforts to protect this vital waterway and to hold both the Houthis and their Iranian sponsors accountable for their aggression. Today, Israel is being attacked by Iran and its proxies on 7 fronts: the Houthis in Yemen, Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah in Lebanon, Shiite militias in Iraq and in Syria, Iran-backed terror attacks in Judea and Samaria, and of course, attacks directly conducted by Iran itself, as the world saw on April 14th. In defending ourselves against this Iranian terror axis, Israel stands on the front lines against a regime that threatens the entire Middle East. It threatens the entire world. This is why all those who seek a more secure and stable Middle East should fully support Israel's action against this terror axis in Yemen, in Gaza, in Lebanon, and elsewhere. And to Israel's enemies, I have a simple message. Do not doubt Israel's determination to defend itself on every front. All those who seek to harm us will pay a very heavy price for their aggression.
All right. So Israel conducts first direct air raid in Yemen, right? So let's talk about this. So the Israeli military, we're still in the 20th of July here, right? So the Israeli military conducted its first direct large-scale air raid on Yemen's port city of Hodeidah. This operation was a response to a series of attacks by the Houthi militant group on Israeli-linked civilian vessels and the recent drone strike in Tel Aviv. The attack on Hodeidah's oil terminal caused a massive fire and reportedly inflicted casualties. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu justified the strike, claiming the port was used to receive weapons from Iran for the Houthis, who vowed to retaliate. Some of my key points: Israeli air raid on Hodeidah event. Israel launched a large-scale air raid on the Yemen port. The strike focused on the port's oil terminal, causing a massive fire with multiple storage tanks ablaze and leaking fuel. Context and justification. the Houthis' attacks. The raid was in response to the Houthis' militants' ongoing attacks on Israeli-linked merchant vessels and a recent drone strike in Tel Aviv that resulted in casualties. 1. And molten 10, I think 10 injured. Netanyahu's statement. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu claimed the port was used to receive Iranian weapons for the Houthis. Casualties and impact. The strikes were believed to have caused casualties through Pacific numbers are not detailed. The Houthis' response. They want retaliation promise. The Houthi group, which controls large parts of Yemen, has vowed to retaliate against Israel's air raid. Broader conflict and involvement. U.S. and UK coalition, a coalition led by the U.S. and UK, have been conducting airstrikes against the Houthis, though these efforts have reportedly had limited success in curbing Houthi attacks on maritime targets. Interesting. So what's the point of continuing bombing if it's not having any effect? Or if that's purposely trying to draw conversation. Israel's direct air raid on Yemen's Hodeidah marks a significant escalation in the conflict with the Houthis militants, who have been targeting Israeli-linked vessels and recently conducted a deadly drone strike in Tel Aviv. The operation, justified by Israel, has a measure against the Iranian supply of weapons to the Houthis, has led to significant damage and casualties. But the Houthis promising further retaliation, I bet they are. This development adds a new dimension to the complex regional conflict involving multiple international actors. I say so, right? So here's some videos. It's going to make me go out. Look at that.
من أجل غزة لو انسرموا.
All right. So in other news. So NATO's top European commander, General Christopher Cavoli, has praised Ukraine's military strategy despite its ongoing struggles on the front lines. In his speech at the Aspen Security Forum, Cavoli emphasized Ukraine's effective force generation and strategic planning. However, the reality on the ground and statements from Ukrainian President Zelensky present a more challenging picture. We'll get into that in a second. I've done a little bit of research. So General Cavali's remarks, strategic praise. So the general lauded Ukraine's strategy, highlighting its balance in recruitment, training, and arms improvement. Force generation. He emphasized the importance of force generation in modern warfare, noting Ukraine's efforts to mobilize and equip its forces. Optimism. The general expressed optimism about Ukraine's strategy and recent mobilization efforts. Contrasting realities. Zelensky's concern. Ukrainian President Zelensky has repeatedly criticized the slow pace of Western armed deliveries, including F-16 fighter jets, which he claims are crucial for their defense. Frontline challenges. Reports from the front lines indicate that Ukrainian forces face significant challenges and have been pushed back by Russian advances in several areas. Even Western doubts. According to the New York Times, many Western officials believe it's nearly impossible for Ukraine to regain all the lost territories due to the overstretched condition of its forces. Russian position. Persistent advances. Russian troops have made gains, particularly in the Donbass region, contradicting Cavali's upbeat assessment of Ukraine's strategy. Call for negotiations. Russian President Putin has stated a willingness to cease hostilities and enter negotiations if Ukraine withdraws from contested territories and renounces NATO ambitions. Interesting, right? While the general Cavali's praise for Ukraine's strategy reflects a positive outlook on the country's military planning and mobilization efforts, The situation remains dire. Ukraine continues to struggle with the timely procurement of Western military aid, and its forces face ongoing setbacks against Russian advances. This disparity highlights the complex and evolving nature of the conflict, where strategic planning alone may only be significant with the necessary resources and timely support. The conflicting narratives underscore the broader challenges faced by Ukraine and its allies in countering Russian aggression. There we go again. While NATO's support remains crucial, the effectiveness of Ukraine's strategy will ultimately depend on the timely and accurate delivery of the military aid and its ability to adapt to dynamic battlefield conditions. But here's some digging, though. In the summary of the New York Times report on Ukraine's military situation, sourced from July 9th, is fascinating when compared to the above commentary. According to the U.S. officials, a report from the New York Times reveals a grim outlook for Ukraine's military prospects. Remember, this is back on the 9th of July. Okay? The official believes that it will be nearly impossible for Kiev to reclaim all its territories lost to Russia, given the current state of Ukrainian forces, which are stretched thin. Key points. U.S. officials' assessment, territorial recovery. U.S. officials privately acknowledge that Ukraine is unlikely to recover all lost territories due to the depletion and overstretching of its forces. Long-term victory. Despite the grim short-term outlook, officials suggest Ukraine might still achieve a strategic victory by moving closer to NATO and European integration if its battlefield performance improves. Upcoming U.S. aid. Financial support. Ukraine will receive $61 billion aid approved by the U.S. Congress to bolster its defenses. They've already received it, right? Peace talks. This is some old research. U.S. officials believe initiating peace talks now would be a mistake, given the impending aid package, which they hope will strengthen Ukraine's position. Russian advances and strategic shifts. Current front lines. Analysts believe neither Ukraine nor Russia can significantly alter the front lines. Potential breakthroughs. While a significant Russian breakthrough is considered unlikely in the near term, there still needs to be concern about Russian potential for substantial advances if a strategic shift occurs. NATO summits and support. NATO stance. As NATO leaders meet in Washington, which they have already, they will affirm their continued support for Ukraine. However, full NATO membership for Ukraine remains a distant possibility. It's crazy, isn't it? Security concerns. Russia's opposition to Ukraine's NATO's ambition is a significant factor, with Moscow citing NATO's expansion as a threat to its national security. So the New York Times report highlights the challenging situation facing Ukraine as it continues to defend against Russian aggression. The depletion of Ukrainian forces and U.S. officials' acknowledgement of the near and possibility of reclaiming all lost territories, a pattern, a sobering picture. Despite this essential U.S. aid package and continued NATO support provide some hope for Ukraine to bolster its defenses and maintain its sovereignty. The strategic implications of these developments are significant. The report suggests that while Ukraine may not receive a complete military victory, it could still emerge stronger through closer ties with NATO and Europe. However, the scenario is contingent on improved battlefield performance, and practical use. Recognizing the ongoing challenges tempers U.S. officials' cautious optimism of the U.S. officials. The potential for significant Russian advances remains a concern. It provides the need for sustained international conflicts, complex dynamics to underscore the importance of strategic planning and resource allocation in determining the future course of the war. So Russian forces advancing in Ukraine and Donbass. Now we're on July 21st. So here's some of the areas right here that they're advancing in, right? I don't think there were any videos in this one, no, but I had to read several things. So here we go. So the Russian Ministry of Defense has reported significant advancements in Ukraine and Donbass region. The recent military developments indicate the Russian forces have secured strategic locations and inflicted heavy casualties on Ukrainian troops. Town captures, they're right there on your screen, right? Ukrainian casualties and equipment losses. Casualties over the past 24 hours. Ukrainian forces have suffered more than 1,500 casualties. Artillery losses. The Ukrainian military has lost multiple artillery guns, including U.S.-made M777 howitzers, Ammunition depots. 7 Ukrainian ammunition depots have been destroyed. Strategic positions. Destruction of military assets. So we're going to go ahead and continue to move on. We have a lot to cover. So in other news, a summary of Mayor Vitaly Klitschko's statement on potential peace deal, talking about Zelensky. Any Zelensky peace deal would require a referendum. Talking about this is the mayor of Kiev. Okay? So the mayor of Kiev stated that any potential peace agreement between Ukraine and Russia would likely require a nationwide referendum to legitimize the deal. Political risk for Zelensky. The mayor of Kiev warned that any move by the Ukrainian President Zelensky towards such an agreement would be risky, potentially leading to his political suicide. Given the high life costs, the mayor expressed that explaining the necessity of territorial concessions to the Ukrainian public would be extremely difficult. Current and future challenges. The mayor of Kiev predicted that the coming months would be particularly challenging for Zelensky, especially with the upcoming U.S. elections, which might influence international support. He also emphasized that there are more viable options than prolonging the conflict for several years. National unity and government. The mayor of Kiev suggested that forming an Israeli-style national unity government could help Ukraine navigate this difficult period and provide the necessary legitimacy for peace deal. However, he also expressed skepticism about Zelensky's willingness to relinquish the power he has concentrated under martial law. Zelensky's legitimacy. Zelensky's term expired in May, but he did not hold a presidential election due to the ongoing martial law. Moscow has indicated that it no longer considers Zelensky a legitimate president as his mandate has expired. Interesting. So in regards to some of this, I found some sourcing going back to July 2nd and July 3rd. Okay? And what I thought was interesting is it talked about the confidence of Zelensky. All right, so let's talk about this before we get ready to close out. So the Pew Research Center polled 35 countries, revealing a significant, right? So that's what they polled, right? The Pew Research Center polled 35 countries, revealing a significant decline in global confidence in Ukrainian President Zelensky. Over 40% of the respondents expressed some confidence in Zelensky's handling of world affairs. Support was highest in Sweden at 80%, the UK at 72%, the Netherlands 66%, Canada 64%, Japan 63%. Skepticism was highest in Hungary at 83%, Greece 72%. Those are just some key facts there. No opinion segment. A notable portion of respondents, including 45% in India and 38% in South Africa and Sri Lanka, did not express any opinion on Zelensky. Decline in confidence. The Pew Research noted a significant decline in the confidence in Zelensky over the past year, with opinions varying based on political ideology. In the U.S., liberals are more than twice as likely as conservatives to have confidence in Zelensky. I thought that was interesting, right? Support for Ukraine. When asked about their nation's military support to Ukraine, opinions varied. 24% of Americans said the U.S. needed to provide more support. 31% said Washington was providing too much support. In Poland, views were split. In Hungary and Turkey, most respondents felt their country's level of support was about the right amount. Democracy in Ukraine. A Kiev International Institute study found that 40% of Ukrainians believe democratic institutions worsened during Zelensky's presidency. Wow. Another 29% saw no change, and 28% blamed the authorities' actions for the decline. Zelensky's legitimacy. Zelensky remained in power despite his term expiring on May 20th, citing martial law as a reason for holding a presidential election. Russian President Putin argued that Zelensky's legitimacy has expired because the Constitution does not provide for suspending presidential elections. So the Pew Research poll reflects a complex and involving perception of President Zelensky on the global stage. The high confidence levels in some Western countries contrast sharply with skepticism in others, particularly Hungary and Greece. This mixed sentiment is compounded by internal criticism within Ukraine regarding democratic decline and the legitimacy of Zelensky's continued presidency. Decline in the global confidence in Zelensky, coupled with mixed opinions on military support for Ukraine, concerns about democratic institutions within the country, highlights the challenges facing the Ukrainian leader. The upcoming period will be crucial for Zelensky as he navigates these issues and seeks to maintain domestic and international support. That's probably in tonight. I hope you enjoyed some of this research that I've done, right? I know it's kind of a little bit of a longer video, but I take my time on these and I try to not make them too long. But at the same time, I want to be thorough the best I can so you have all the information you need, right? The links to a lot of stuff will be in the description box. Not all the links, I can't fit everything in there, right? But they'll have links in there. Click on the link to the full report, right? So you can follow along. Without further ado, I'm out of here. Hope you enjoyed these updates. I love you all so much, right? Remember, never hold back, right? I love you all so much. I'm out.